Some landings are already lost. Before the wheels even touch the ground, it's already too late. If you were on board, you'd think everything looks normal, just another landing. But it isn't. That's where the danger is, when everything appears to be fine. From the cabin, nothing feels wrong. After 20 years of experience, I can tell you, it always feels that way. The runway is right there, and the descent feels steady. This is the part of the flight where people relax. You sit up. You look outside. Maybe you're already thinking about what happens after landing. But this is exactly the moment you shouldn't trust. Because the most dangerous landings don't feel dangerous. They feel normal. And that's what makes them so difficult to recognize, just seconds before the wheels touch the ground. What you don't see is that by this point, the aircraft is no longer in a position where small mistakes can be absorbed. Earlier in the flight, there's time. Time to correct speed. Time to stabilize the approach. But down here, there isn't. Every small imperfection that still exists has to be resolved in seconds. And if it isn't, there's nothing left to hide it. What actually happens when it goes wrong? On February 25, 2009, Turkish Airlines Flight 1951 was on approach to Amsterdam. From the outside, everything looked normal. The aircraft was lined up with the runway. The descent looked stable. There was no sign of an emergency. I remember that day clearly. I was in a hangar near the runway, in a training session, close enough to see the approach, but far enough that nothing immediately looked wrong. It just looked like another landing. But inside the aircraft, one small system was giving the wrong information. A radio altimeter, an instrument that measures how high the aircraft is above the ground, was not working correctly. It suddenly showed a value of about -8 feet. That means the system believed the aircraft was already at ground level, even though it was still high above the runway. This wrong signal triggered the auto throttle system. The engines were automatically reduced to idle power, too early. At that point in the approach, the aircraft still needed thrust to maintain speed, but instead, it began to slow down, gradually, quietly. There was no sudden alarm that made the situation obvious right away. The speed kept decreasing. The aircraft got slower and slower while continuing to descend. From where I was standing, nothing about it looked urgent. That's what made it so deceptive. By the time the pilots fully realized what was happening, the speed was already too low. The aircraft entered a stall. Just seconds before reaching the runway, there was not enough altitude left to recover. What looked like a normal landing turned into a crash short of the runway. The next thing I saw was thick black smoke rising. Sirens started going off, one after another. Inside the building, people looked at each other, and then it went quiet. Unnaturally quiet, because we all understood what had just happened. The landing you don't see. There's something happening in the cabin during landing that most passengers are never aware of. A few minutes before landing, we take our seats, and from that moment on, the focus shifts completely. You start going through your procedures, because this is the moment where it has to be right, without hesitation. You think about what could happen and how you would respond if it does. If the aircraft runs off the runway, what do I shout? Who opens which door? If something goes wrong, you need to be prepared. You go over your role, what you're responsible for, and what needs to happen first. It's something you've trained for many years, but just before landing, you run through it again, just to make sure it's there when you need it. Because if something goes wrong in those final seconds, there's no time to react. You have to be ready before it even begins. The moment it stops flying. Now imagine the opposite. Everything looks stable until it suddenly isn't. Right before touchdown, there's a point where the aircraft stops behaving the way it did seconds earlier. Lift begins to fade, and if the descent rate is just slightly too high, there's nothing left to cushion it. No altitude, no time, just impact. To passengers, it feels like a hard landing. To the pilots, it's a force they were never meant to take. when there's no way back. By the time the aircraft hits the runway, everything is already decided. There are no more corrections left, no time to fix anything. Whatever energy the aircraft carries into that moment has to be absorbed, or it doesn't. The crew stays on high alert, because even after touchdown, anything can still go wrong. The landing that crashes at the end of the runway. A landing can feel perfect, right up until the runway runs out. In 2005, Air France Flight 358 was on approach into Toronto, flying straight into a thunderstorm. Heavy rain was falling over the runway and visibility was reduced, but from the outside, nothing about the approach looked extreme. The aircraft crossed the runway, still too fast. It didn't land. It just kept going. Low over the ground, staying in the air longer than it should. Inside the cockpit, this is the moment pilots know. You're already further down the runway than planned. And you know, this isn't how it's supposed to look. Every second you stay in the air is runway you're losing. By the time the aircraft finally touched down, it was far beyond the normal touchdown zone. The pilots reacted immediately. Maximum braking, reverse thrust. But the runway was wet, and the aircraft kept moving, fast. From inside the cockpit, you can feel it. You're on the ground, but you're not stopping. The end of the runway is getting closer. There's no more space left. No time to fix what already happened. The aircraft ran off the end of the runway, went down, and dropped into a ravine beyond the airport. The impact broke the aircraft into two pieces, and within moments, a fire started. Thick smoke rising, flames spreading along the fuselage. Inside the cabin, what started as a normal landing turned into something completely different. In those last 3 seconds, passengers had to get out quickly while cabin crew acted immediately, following their training and guiding people out of the aircraft as the fire grew. Everyone survived, but in that moment, it didn't feel like survival. It felt like fighting for your life. The part that stays with you. What makes moments like that so difficult is how normal everything felt just seconds before. You don't see it coming. There's no clear moment where it changes. 1 second, it's just another landing. The next, everything is shaking. And afterwards, that's the part that stays with you. Not the impact, not the noise. How easily it could have gone the other way. And how in those final seconds, there's a line you don't even realize you've crossed. Why not go around? So, why not go around? Why not abort the landing the moment something feels off? Pilots are trained to do exactly that, and many times, they do. But these situations don't always feel wrong. They feel close enough to fix or close enough to continue. And that's where the risk lives, because in those final seconds, almost correct is not enough, and trying to save a landing that should have been abandoned can remove the last chance to recover. The next time you land, pay attention to how it feels. The moment the aircraft gets close to the ground, it will feel routine, maybe even smooth. But what you're experiencing is the result of decisions made in seconds. Welcome to Cabin Confidential. Subscribe because the most important stories in aviation are the ones you were never meant to hear.